Entering the Pat Mayo Experience.
Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, the Players Championship live chat, DraftKings picks, updated bets, and the weather report. Reid Fowler from DK Live will be joining me today. I don't know where you're watching this, whether it be on Facebook, on Periscope, or YouTube. I will be going through the YouTube chat, and the first thing you need to do, people, remember, and I'll bring this up a few times during the show so we can continue to roll out these live chats for you. It's a preview for what Major Week is really going to feel like, but maybe we can start doing it every week again with the Valspar next week, maybe the match play. Probably not the match play because that starts early, but like the episode, smash that like button. Goes a long way to help keeping all of this free. I want to start with the weather report from TPC Sawgrass right now. Basically, there doesn't look like there's any sort of wave advantage. I'm looking at the Thursday and Friday. What's the station I'm looking at here? Jacksonville Beach is what I'm looking at for the wind tower. I posted the link in the YouTube chat right now, and it looks like it's going to get gusts up to 20 all throughout the day. It's going to be 64 degrees in the morning at 8 a.m., and then it's going to go up to 70, 73, so it's going to get warmer as the day goes along. Maybe it softens up or hardens up a little bit. A lot of people have been asking me about, hey, it's moved to March. How's that going to change the course? I have no fucking idea how that's going to change the course. Like, everyone wants to make these bold proclamations about something they have no idea about. I think that if you pick a lane to go with, being like, hey, it's going to be colder, it's a bit soggy at TPC Sawgrass, that leans itself more towards driving distance, then go with that and build your lineups. It doesn't mean you're going to be right. Just acknowledge that you might be wrong when it comes to this. I'm going to keep my more balanced approach, look at ball striking, look at tee to green, around the green. Approach and around the green specifically is what I'm looking for here, and hopefully some of the loser putters that I've picked actually drop some putts this week. So, Reid Fowler, what are you seeing out there from the course at TPC Sawgrass on the internet? Because I know you're not actually there.
Yeah, you can't tell that I'm not actually there. No, yeah, I mean, like you just said, a lot it's going to account for strategy as well. Like, how do you construct your lineups, right? You don't necessarily want to go too far over the boat in terms of saying, well, what weather draw is going to predict, a solid lineup. Like you said, like you mentioned, if you want to take one approach, it's those longer hitters, softer, the ball's not going to roll out as much. And so if you want to lean towards that a little bit, as opposed to saying, well, and we hear it a lot, right? Anybody can win here. The shorter hitters might have a slight disadvantage, but that's not going to be the case. I'm not going to use weather too much. What's interesting, though, just about roster construction, before I forget, is you look at Bay Hill, you look at these other courses, especially here. I mean, there have been so many duplicate lineups last year in these big MME tournaments. The winning lineups that you see in these bigger tournaments, I mean, you're leaving at least $500, $600, $700. We saw it at Bay Hill last week. We've seen it last year at this course specifically. We see how guys miss the cut at the top here at this tournament. So if I'm doing any sort of roster construction strategy, it's leaving a decent amount of money, not going too crazy, but leaving a decent amount of money off the salary cap.
All right, so what do you want to get into here? Your pick to win right off the top? Because we've all talked about, I just released my betting cheat sheet. I ended up going with Tiger over that combination of Stenson and Kuchar, and that's all the money I had left. I reinvested another $15 to get an each way on Brennan Grace at 160 to 1. I don't know why I like Brennan Grace so much this week. I think it's like the if it plays a bit more difficult, I like Brennan Grace. Around the green game, I like Brennan Grace. He's won at Harbour Town. He likes these small greens, so he always puts better on Bermuda grass, too. So Brennan Grace is the guy who's probably going to sink a lot of my lineups this week. But who is your pick to win, Reid?
Xander Schauffele. I really like him. I know he had that second place last year. He's been playing well, obviously, at the beginning of this season. Again, he's one of those guys, right, that we saw last year that didn't do necessarily great around the greens, and putting on surfaces that weren't POA was really his Achilles heel. He's turned that around. He's at 25 to 1, or where I saw him last. He might have gone down. I don't think that he would have gone down too much. But Xander Schauffele would be one. And then the guy who's sort of my grace is Tyrrell Hatton. I mean, he's one guy that, we see him pop in these spots. And I think I got him at 125 to 1. I think he came down to about 100 to 1. He's just gaining a ton of strokes around the green. His approach has been bad since Waste Management, but every single tournament since then, leading up to this one, he's been gaining strokes through approach. Again, we talk about these guys, that mentality. If he does get, he's sort of that John Rahm-esque type player that if he gets a little, hot under the collar, then he might just blow up. And we saw with that clip where he just had his caddy answer if it was a bad shot, which clearly it was last week. He's a guy that I really like that potentially could burn my lineups.
So the funny thing about Tyrrell Hatton as opposed to Jon Rahm, they're both fiery. Yes, we do know this, but it seems like when Hatton starts getting hot, he doesn't actually play poorly. He just starts getting very mad at himself. Like I remember WGC Mexico 2 years ago, he ended up hitting like a spike mark on the green. He's still ended up parring the hole. When Rahm starts going in full meltdown mode, the guy's making triple bogeys. So I do like the grinder mentality of Tyrrell Hatton here. I didn't actually end up using him in all of my lineups or any of my lineups, to be perfectly honest with you. I played 21 this week. And I ended up with a weird selection of, like, I used Jason Day and I used Justin Rose. And I don't know how I feel about that. I can still pivot at some point. Like, I know that Bryson's going to come in with a lot of low ownership, that I might move my Day shares onto Bryson. I actually have a few Ricky shares as well, because it just seems like no one talked about him all week, that he's not super expensive. He might be even a tad overpriced based on his baseline, like with Matsuyama, like $1,500 cheaper. I think that they're around an equivalent play. But if no one's going to use Bryson and no one's going to use Ricky, that might be enough for me to move some shares onto them and get off some other guys. I'll update my DraftKings cheat sheet with the highest projected owned players, but I'm looking at it right now. I got Ricky coming in at like 8%, Bryson coming in at 6%, and Day keeps trending up. He was at like 3% on Monday, 6% on Tuesday. He's up to like 9% now. It seems like everyone's back on board with Jason Day.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, I mean, if we get a Jason Day, I think you were talking with Feinberg about this. If we get a Jason Day who's injured but actually plays, that's when he does well. And in this tournament, we've talked about it quite a bit, is that it's extremely variant. You get these guys like Siwoo Kim, you get the Tim Clarks, the Martin Keimers, that can win this tournament, Stephen Ames. You get a sort of a full breadth of guys who can win. And so you can easily go off of, some of the chalk here. You don't necessarily have to pivot because they're highly owned, but I mean, you're pivoting to talent. Jason Day, Ricky Fowler, Bryson DeChambeau, these guys, if they turn it on, if they find something on the driving range, we know Bryson's out there till dawn. If they find something and you have them at 8%, you're going to be in the winning there.
So I do want to give some rules for the chat. If you say something I don't like, or you just start clogging up the chat, you out there will be banned for life. Oh, it's back. The banning for life is back. I think it's everyone's favorite part of the show. And it's my favorite part. Plus, you can follow Reid on Twitter at Reid T. Fowler. I like these little write-ups that you're doing. Did you get boxed out a DK playbook? Because I have my article up.
Yeah, and Ulrich just has a monopoly, or he has a share too as well. So I gotta kind of seek my way in there. But yeah, it's something that obviously keeps my mind fresh, as opposed to just working on the sweat, the nightly show that we do. It's just good. It's good to do research. It's good to obviously get a full breadth of because my stats might be different than yours. What I'm looking at, my weighted model on Fantasy National might be different than yours. So it just gives the people out there just a different perspective. So yeah, if you like it, great.
So if you become a member at fantasynational.com right now, the monthly package will actually bring you through all the research you need for Masters Week if you join today. So you'll get Wednesday to research the players and use the tools to build your lineups, and the monthly will carry you all the way through till Thursday at the Masters, which means you get your full research and access to all the tools for that week as well. So it's a great soft spot in the Fantasy National pricing to get in on that monthly package right now. Plus the new notes features. It seems like the community's having a lot of fun with this, Reid, where a lot of people, I'll give you an example right now. Let's see what people are saying about Dustin Johnson. I haven't read the latest on Dustin Johnson. I've got 5 notes on him here. Let's see. Strokes gained approach has increased the previous 2 weeks and has made the players cut 5 years in a row. That's from DB. All right, that's a good note. This one person says, evidently no one is taking Dustin Johnson this week, so I like him. Dustin checks all the boxes in every area except for 2, fairways gained and course history. But if he keeps the driver in the bag and doesn't hit it into the water, he's definitely going to be in contention. What do you make of Dustin Johnson, by the way?
Yeah, he's interesting, right? Best finish here at T12. Hasn't had the best time here at the Players, but man, we talk about any of these the top 5 guys in the elite range. They can obviously win. You can make an easy case for these guys to win. We know what he can do with the approach, ball striking off the tee. If he doesn't have, obviously he's not going to use driver here. You just think about mentality-wise. We sort of touched on it, right, with Jon Rahm. Obviously, Dustin Johnson isn't in the same ilk as Jon Rahm, but you just figure that for some reason at this course, he doesn't turn it on. At least that's what I'm seeing. The stats don't prove that because obviously he's clearly a really good player. But like you mentioned on Monday, which I think is a really good point, if you start your lineups with the number 1 and number 2 golfer with Dustin Johnson and Justin Rose, you're going to have a potentially a contrarian lineup with the 2 best golfers in the world. So I'm not going to personally be using it just because of soft pricing and there's so much value elsewhere. But I mean, I wouldn't hate it if you chose him for either one and done in Gup's contest, or if you started your lineups with him.
Yeah, I actually ended up fading all three at the top of the board. No Rory, no Dustin, and no Justin Thomas for me. I look forward to losing all my money at the Players again this year for like the third year in a row. But maybe if Tiger ends up winning or if Ricky ends up winning, then my DraftKings lineups can be looking pretty good. Let's get to the chat. Number one, Remy Lopez comes in first. He says, Windham Clark. What do you think, Pat? I will say that if he doesn't gain like 9 strokes putting like he did at Honda, he's going to miss the cut. He might come dead last.
Yeah. I mean, a good thing to note, too, you're going to see these names all over the pricing map, right? In the 6K range, low sevens, you're going to see names, maybe not marquee names, but names that you notice. Wyndham Clark, because he popped in a couple tournaments, you're going to see that pop up, but no way. I mean, there are some other guys, right, in that mid 6K range, or even higher than that I'd rather play. But you're right. If he's not putting lights out, he's not going to do well, so no for me.
The next question is from Christopher. My lineup in your DraftKings tournament has crushed yours the past 3 weeks. I don't even think you placed. I couldn't find you. You know what? That's a hurtful comment, Christopher. You're banned for life, asshole. I don't need to hear about me losing more money. I already lost the money. I don't need to be just put my face into it. Banned for life. Get out of here. Never want to see you again. Let's see. Nathan Joyce.
He was asking for that ban too, right?
Oh,
he
wanted
the
first in the comment section, being an asshole towards me. Clear ban for life. Never see him again. Nathan Joyce asks, I think we need a midweek see Woo Kim. I would be fine with seeing Siwoo on Sunday. I actually didn't use him in any DraftKings lineups because I'm going back to my old rule of not using Siwoo on DraftKings and just betting Siwoo outright and betting him to place. He's already paid off the year with his 2 top 5s in the 2 tournaments through the California swing. But Siwoo is a very interesting one here. Did you use him in any lineups?
No, and I think he used all of his win capital or his top 5 equity early in the season. And, like you mentioned, we see it that strokes getting around the greens and short game. That's really where he won last week, or excuse me, a couple years ago, right? In putting, is that he was just a maven around the greens. So I didn't use him. I think he's a better bet if you wanted to, but no for me. It just gives a soft pricing. I know I'm going to beat the drum here on this, but soft pricing, I'd rather go elsewhere.
Scott asks, there's been talk that the move from May to March may affect the course quite a bit. Has this changed your mind on any players as the week's gone along? It hasn't, because I don't actually know how it's going to play. The reports say it's playing softer and it's going to play a little bit longer than it would. And obviously the temperature is going to be cooler, moving from Mother's Day into middle of March. But the course isn't super long to begin with. Like, it's still under 7,200 yards. I know Tiger had a comment where he said, you used to hit like fairway wood 8-iron into the 18th. Now you probably have to hit driver and a 6-iron. I don't know if that just seems, it's going to play like 100 yards longer. That seems kind of crazy. I think there's just a lot of chatter about this, and I can be completely off base, but I'm not going to change my approach to this at all. How about you?
No, I mean, something else that I think he or someone else mentioned is that on 17, they were hitting 6-iron in before, as opposed to 9-iron in May. And one thing you have to realize too, the stats, the numbers, right? Clearly, you're going to look at March as a little bit more difficult than May. But the technology is completely different from 12, 13 years ago. I mean, Tiger mentioned in his presser too, if you're carrying it 280 back when he started, you were considered long. Now you got to carry it about 320. So even if this course plays longer, right, it's going to be 102 to 200 yards longer. You're going to have to hit a 6 instead of an 8. So it's not going to matter too much to me.
Jeff says, what's your projected ownership on Matt Wallace this week? $6,700, 35th ranked player in the world. Seems like a steal. Perhaps too good to be true. Coming off a great week at API as well. I have him at less than 3% right now. It's just, you're not going to see a lot of high-end guys. Like the chalk in the $6,000 range is going to be Im. It's going to be Ann, maybe Chesson Hadley, and I feel like there's someone else I'm missing here. But it's not going to be Matt Wallace, put it that way. I have no problem with him. I didn't use him, but I certainly get it, especially if you're taking a lot of these Euros. He's the cheapest, and one of the guys that actually breaks through and wins a lot on the European Tour, so this could just be a spot for him. I don't like to target first-time players at Sawgrass, though.
Yeah, I got him around the same, like 5-8%. I think Jason Kokrak is the other guy in this range, right? That's going to garner, a lot of ownership. I mean, like you said, he's a decent pivot if you want to. But again, I'd rather pivot in other spots as opposed to there's 6K for a reason, right? Even though we have a Matt Wallace who's popped recently, there's still 6K in this range for a reason. So decent on the Euro Tour style, but I'm with you. You don't want to get a first timer out here at the Players.
Yeah, Matt Wallace, 6% is actually what the projection comes in for him right now on a Wednesday afternoon. Maybe that changes after the show. Maybe people don't actually play him as much as they're going to say they are, or maybe he's their sneaky play that they're all going to play. He ends up at like 9%. Ownership projection is really tough when you get into the $6,000 level. Like, you can get a pretty good baseline of 2 or 3% at the very top because you hear so much chatter about the very top end guys, and there's only so many rosters that you can construct with those guys in them. So adding projections to one takes away from another because you can't reasonably have 3 of these guys in your lineup. With Matt Wallace, he fits every single lineup. So if he's one of those sneaky plays that people are saving for themselves, he could end up a bit higher. But I think that where this is such a public tournament, and you even see it with these tournament on DraftKings, $250K to first prize, you're going to get a lot of casuals coming in. I can guarantee you the casual golf fan does not know who Matt Wallace is. Even if they watched last week, they probably still don't even know who Matt Wallace is. Is it too rash to delete all my Rory lineups since he's under-cursed? I mean, that's for you to decide. I mean, a lot of the Xander curse this week has been going to really enhance the roster of the Cleveland Browns. So maybe that's where it's focused this week. So like we saw it when Dustin Johnson won his one and done in WGC Mexico. Forgot what was going on that week, but he really directed the Xander curse attention on something else that we've seen this before. It's like he had a great week like 2 years ago picking games. He was like 14-2 against the spread. We couldn't quite figure out like what happened with Tim's picks. How did he get so hot? It's because he was out killing poor Timothy B. Anderson, as it turned out. He was just talking about this guy who no one talked about since 1980 who ran for president. All of a sudden, the guy's dead over the weekend. You're like, oh, so that's where the Xander curse went. So sometimes it evens itself out. What do you make of Rory? Because I'm not using any of him here. He has played a lot better in his past few starts at Sawgrass over his first few starts, but I have a feeling that he's going to be the highest owned of all the top-end guys.
Yeah, he's been playing so well. We don't have to rattle through the stats because we've seen it, right? Tee to green, ball striking approach, you name it. This course, despite his shortcomings when he's not finished or close out on a Sunday, he's been playing extremely well. One thing that I'm noticing about Rory, and I'm going to be fading him as well, so just get out of the way, is that his wedges aren't as acute as they have been in the past. They're getting a little bit better as of recent, but we see that 125 to 150 range, not as great as he has been in the past. And when you get a guy like Rory, again, we can make a case for all these guys, right? But you can't play Tiger. You can't play a ton of these guys at the top. I mean, you want to, right? You play 2 and then go down in that low 7 or 6. But I have more of a case to build with a Justin Rose, with a Brooks Koepka even, means leaving Rory off the map. JT, even if you want to forego how he's been playing recently, he sets up perfectly here. So I'd rather do that and potentially lose out on that top 5 equity. But at this top range, I think you have to get a guy. You could play all of them, but you have to decipher which guy you want to fade. And that's going to be Roy for me as well.
See, Cantlay or Fleetwood, they're right around the same price. I actually went with Cantlay over Fleetwood this week in my DraftKings lineups.
Even with the 1,000 bunkers that we see in this course, that Cantlay, he's
stay out of the bunkers, and you're doing great.
I mean, Fleetwood's been playing great, but he just can't close either. I'd probably go with Fleetwood there.
Yeah, I mean, Fleetwood just objectively, like talent versus talent, Cantlay can't quite put it together. But he was the first-round leader at this course last year. It just seems like one of these breakthrough spots. Maybe Fleetwood is the guy who ends up breaking through. But I know ownership projections have them around each other, and Molinari is right below them as well. So I used Molinari and Cantlay in the lineups, and I didn't use any Fleetwood. It's just a choice that, it comes down to you. Are you going to make that choice, or are you not going to make that choice? I know some people are playing Spieth, like where you said you used a lot of Xander Schauffele. You probably can't hit that level all that much unless you're starting with Schauffele, and that's how you're building your lineup. So you got to pick your poison. I mean, if you're playing 150 lineups, use them. The more and more you condense down, I would go Cantlay over Fleetwood. If I was playing one lineup, that's a decision that I would make.
Right, especially the game mode that you're playing, right? GPPs over cash. If you feel more confident.
No, we're not even here to talk cash games. Get out of here with your cash games.
And for life. No, Molinari, right? Molinari is someone that has been steady, and we've seen once he gets a hot putter, which is what he did. He gained 8-9 strokes last week at Bay Hill, and he shot a 64 on Sunday. He rides that hot putter. We saw it last year in that sort of June to July, where the John Deere and the Open Championship. He's amazing when it comes to getting on this hot streak. So if you want to feel more confident about a Francesco over some of these guys like a Cantlay, I don't mind that. But for me, just in terms of where I want to play, like you said, as a public tournament here, you're going to see more people on Molinari. Which is not bad. He's not a bad player, obviously, but I'd rather go Fleetwood.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Like with Cantlay sandwich right in between them, Rick Gaiman talks about this a lot with the sandwich pricing. That projections do seem to have Cantlay around the same area, but I just find it hard to believe that you have Molinari coming off a win, who's like $1,000 underpriced, and he's won so much over the last year, plus the course history, and then Tommy Fleetwood, who's practically the highest owned guy every time that he's on a slate. That people are going to go to Cantlay over those two guys. It's just I feel like the projection for his ownership, Cantlay that is just overhyped right now. I think that he'll come in lower than the projections think.
Yeah, I mean, I think 10% at most, right, for Cantlay, and he's an extreme ball striker, right? So that's what we want. That's what we want. Stay out of the bunker, stay out of those grass bunkers as well, because we don't know how he does in not sand but still bunkers. But again, he's a fine pivot play in that range.
Remember to smash the like button for the episode and subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast, where you can always listen to all of this on demand. And if you want to get into a draw for $20 DK, if you subscribe to the audio podcast, go leave a review. iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, 5-star review, something nice about the show. Maybe how handsome Reid Fowler is, although you probably can even hear how handsome you are through the audio podcast. I'm not sure. And your DK handle, and you're in a draw for 20 DK bucks. Winners announced on next Monday show for the Valspar and Players Recap with Jeff Feinberg. Do not be afraid to tune into the live Cut Sweat show on Friday too that I'm doing with Feinberg. Maybe we'll have some guests on the line too after we blab for an hour and a half and nothing has happened and we just run out of things to say. We'll phone Cuss and get him freaking out about Le'Veon Bell. I don't know. Next question. Aaron asked, 100% fading JT. Am I nuts? I always wonder this when people say they're fading. Like, how many lineups are you playing? If you're playing 2 lineups, you can only have a maximum of 12 players. So you're going to be fading a lot of people. I'm not playing Justin Thomas this week. I don't feel good about it because anytime that you fade Justin Thomas, he ends up basically winning the tournament. He's one of the 3 best players in this field statistically. He lines up almost perfectly. These are the notes that I actually put in on fantasynational.com for Justin Thomas. He went 19 straight events gaining strokes on approach before losing 3.2 at the Honda. Very strange. Between Honda and WGC Mexico, he lost strokes on approach in 5 of 7 rounds. We know he was dealing with that wrist injury. Maybe this is a buy low spot on Justin Thomas. And he, over the past 12 months, he's only actually played 2 consecutive rounds 3 times where he lost strokes with approach before the Honda. The BMW Championship, last year's Players, and then WGC Mexico the year before in 2018. So the guy is awesome. If you can get an ownership break on him, maybe it's a time to push on him. I'm just fading him this week because I want to build a more balanced approach, and using those top 3 guys doesn't really lend itself to that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the beautiful things about when this pricing comes out before the previous tournament ends, even though JT wasn't there, didn't pop or didn't do well, right? That's what we get is potentially soft pricing, and then we get a balanced approach. You go either way. You can play each one of these guys if you're doing 10, 20 lineups and feel confident that you have at least some stake or win equity at the top, or you can start your lineups at a Brooks at 10 or even Ricky in the 9K range and feel confident, or even roster 6 of the 8K guys around there, high 7. So, I mean, you can really go a multitude of different ways. You're going to want to be different. And fading JT, obviously, because of what we said previous, is completely fine. You're going to be fading an extreme talent, a guy who really sets up perfectly for this course, right? Short game, ball striker extraordinaire. When he gets a hot putter, obviously he does well, but we don't know.
Have you ever played or not played someone based on player interviews Monday through Wednesday? Is it worth researching? I think it's worth researching simply for the fact that they might give you some sort of insight to the course, maybe something that you're not seeing, and that can change the way that you think about your process. But no, I really don't put a ton of what these players, especially when you're like evaluating your own game, players can either be super critical of their game, maybe it's not as bad as it seems, or they go the complete opposite way. Like the players themselves are not the most trustworthy people as it pertains to their game. So I try to not let that stuff influence me.
Yeah, it's the highest form of coach talk that we get in football, right? These golfers try to, and Rory said it on Sunday, that his bad Sundays are like having a bad Thursday. And it's not the same. Having a bad Sunday is worse than having a bad Thursday. But you're right. I mean, JT, actually, going back to what you were saying, he did make a comment about this course that around the green or short game isn't the best here. So, right, maybe he practices a little bit more leading up to this. There's no Pro-Am today, so these guys have more time to practice. So, but then you're just trying to find maybe tiebreakers if you don't want to use JT or use him. So that's the only thing I would add to that.
Evan asked, 25% Spieth is my current move in GPPs. On a scale from me to Cust, how insane am I? Oh, good luck is all I can say about that. I'm not doing it. I can't take the plunge. But if he hits, like, what's the projection that I have him for right now? Let's see. Jordan Spieth,
About 2%.
3% ownership.
Yeah.
Like, everyone is now off. All the people that were playing Jordan Spieth leading up to this being like, oh, this is the week he's going to get it back. This is the week he's going to get it back. They're all off now, too. And that's usually the time to strike when you're going to go in on someone. But I just don't know where his game's at right now. He's still playing well in the first round. I think if you're going to bet Spieth or use him on DraftKings, bet him first round leader or play him in Showdown day one. Yeah,
exactly. What do you think his Masters odds are going to be? Like, or his pricing, right? That's kind of where you will want to figure out, well, a guy about Spieth is maybe play him on course history alone, as opposed to obviously not current form. But look at those guys around him, right? You're on 25%. And that goes to your earlier point. How many lineups are you? If you're doing 50 lineups, you're doing 100, and 25% is not going to really hurt you that much. But if you're doing 4, and you got a guy like Jordan Spieth at 89, where you go Fleetwood, Cantlay, all of those guys we talked about, to me, it's not a play that I try to do just because ownership is low. It's low because he's playing like garbage.
Scott asks, looking to pay down, would you go Molinari or Johnny Vegas as that last spot? I went with Trey Molinari. The only two guys that I used from way down on the list, because I did want to build those balanced approaches, were Trey Molinari and Chris Kirk, 6,400, 6,200. Sung Kang, Grayson Murray, and Johnny Vegas were the other 3 in that pool that I was considering. And I just decided that I didn't want to construct a lot of rosters those ways. They ended up on my first round leader cards, actually. I think they're both all right plays. Obviously, Vegas has been getting off to these strong starts. And if he gets off to the strong start, chances are he's going to end up making the weekend. And that's all you're really looking for from a player down at this end to help you jam in a Justin Rose and Justin Thomas, or Tiger Woods and Brooks Koepka to start your rosters, and then have someone else good in that third spot as well. But I would go Molinari, who's made 7 straight cuts, but hasn't played in a while, over Johnny Vegas, who's really embraced this Florida swing so far.
Yeah, and he popped at Honda too, right? If you look at PGA National as a corollary, that's something that I'm looking at. And Johnny Vegas looks like he's putting that life coach, or the coach that he's got for the emotional and the mental side of it, to good use, because he's been playing well in this Florida swing. And when he gets a hot putter, we've seen it. We've seen him do well. He's sneaky long. Again, you're not going to need to be long off the tee here. But even if he's a little wayward off the tee or with the irons, he's putting really well as of late. He's gotten a lot of good finishes on this Florida swing. So I would go there with Johnny. And Sung Kang, he's another guy that gives us the ability to use because of the soft pricing. So those are 2 guys I like. But Vegas more so than Kang.
Yeah, and I'm in on Molinari over those 2 guys. Vince asked, if you had 75% day last week, which I did, would you go 100% this week? Oh boy. The Jason Day thing is really interesting. It seems like he's going to be fine. He's got some injections into his back. He says he feels a lot better. And maybe he just wanted to win the Players more than he wanted to win the API. But I don't think that you need to go so massively overweight on him, because max he's probably going to be 10% owned. That, hey, if you really think Jason Day is going to win, just use him and play 1 lineup or play 100 lineups and use him in all 100. But I think that's a lot of risk to inherit for your lineups as someone who just went through this grinder.
Yeah. And Jason Day, we talked about it. We won't belabor the point about injuries. And like what you said, you made really good points earlier in the week. But yeah, he's great. He's a great putter. He's great around the greens. And like, that's what you want. That's what you want here. Again, you don't have to go overboard with 100% day. But, being overweight, like you mentioned, at 10%, if you go 15, 20%, it's not a bad strategy at all.
Are you fading Adam Scott since he's been doing worse on approach for 3 straight tournaments despite the elite course history? Yeah, I am fading Adam Scott this week. It never really turns out well at the Players when you fade Adam Scott, former winner. The course history, obviously, very, very strong. I think he's going to be pretty popular, and just all dependent on the guys around him. Like when you start looking at the players in his range, whether it's just above Molinari and Cantlay, or just below with Kuchar and Casey and Poulter, I just like those alternatives better for myself. And Hideki is $100 more, and I really like Hideki this week.
Yeah, me too. Hideki's one of my core plays this week. But even if you go down further, Henrik Stenson, right? He found something last week with his irons. And so even then, I'd rather go a little bit lower. Adam Scott changed the putter. Like, we don't necessarily know why, because he was putting really well. Changed the putting stroke. We don't know. Is he going back to this? Was he preparing for this tournament specifically, and seeing what kind of putter he wants to use, what kind of stroke he wants to use on Bermudas and here as well. But yeah, extreme course history. So if you're playing that course history side, then yeah, I mean, Adam Scott is nice, but I'm with you. I'm fading fading Scott and going to some of those other guys in that price range.
Which chalk are you eating this week? Molinari, Rafa Cabrera Bello, or Paul Casey? I have more Paul Casey than I have of any of those guys. I have 0 Rafa Cabrera Bello, and I have a very moderate amount of Francesco Molinari. I believe I'm at 30%, but I can check that for you right now. Although I had it up. Where the hell did it go? My lineups. Let's see here. Molinari, I have 33% Molinari. I have 50% Paul Casey in my lineups. Which chalk are you eating?
Yeah, it's Paul Casey. We love Paul Casey at this like $8,000 price. You just look at that and you're like, this can't be, just because we know what he can do with his irons. It's the putting. You see it right there, 107th in strokes gained putting. But ball striking approach, you see it. He's a guy that is coming in, especially with his odds at 50-1. I like it way better than those other guys. So Casey is a guy that I'm eating chalk. I got about like 20%, 25% of my lineups with Casey.
Todd asks, Reid, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, how much money left on the table is too much in terms of roster construction? I think where this is a full field event, you don't really need to worry about trying to be duplicated unless you're using like 6 of the chalkiest guys possible. But if you looked at last year's winning lineup, if you constructed the optimal lineup, I think like $6,000 was left on the table because it was all $7,200 guys who ended up at the top of the leaderboard. So I think it really depends on your risk threshold. Like I would try to use as much of the salary cap as possible. Like I have a few lineups that are like $600 left on the table, $500 left on the table, because that's the lineup that I wanted to put in. But if you start sacrificing all this win equity, maybe that works out for you, but I think it's a lower percentage play.
Yeah, and I'll start off with how many lineups are you going to play too, right? Like if you're playing a single entry, you don't want to do that. You don't want to just get a lot of 7 and 8K guys. You want to get the guys at the top. But if you're playing these MMEs, then yeah, I think you're going to have to pick and choose and see what golfers you like. You can Gary Woodland as your least expensive guy, or RCP as your least expensive guy, and your most expensive guy being like a Ricky Fowler isn't a bad play. So if you're leaving $500-$600 on the table, we see this with majors and soft pricing, you're not going to feel as bad as if you did it at the Heritage or if you did it at Valspar. There's no number exactly. First, see how many lineups and what strategy in terms of game mode that you're going to be playing, and then go from there. But like you mentioned, $500-$600 is not crazy.
Again, remember to smash the like button for this episode to keep the show free. Scott asks, there's been 0 Patrick Reed talk. Any chance this is Captain America's week? I don't like how he sprays it off the tee, although if you look at, I tweeted this out last night, just the difference between his first few rounds and few tournaments at TPC Sawgrass versus the last few years, he's been substantially better the last 6 rounds than he was in his first 10. So maybe he's figuring it out a little bit. I think on paper he actually has sort of the perfect game for this place, as long as he's not spraying it into the water off the tee, which could always be a thing. It's somewhere like Augusta, you can spray it a bit and not get into as much trouble. With Patrick Reed, obviously he won at the Masters and he's won at Doral, a Florida course, which is a bit longer. If this plays longer, I really wouldn't worry too much about that. Augusta's also a long course and not a problem for Patrick Reed. He has the short game to contend. I have him projected right now at 4% ownership. So maybe he is a nice pivot play. I don't really know what to do with him, so I'm avoiding him.
Yeah, same here. When you talk about the short game and the putting, that's Patrick Reed's game over the last 6-7 tournaments right now. He's been pretty elite with his sand saves as well. So if you think that he is going to spray that, and especially here too, we kind of saw it early in the report saying that the ref's not as thick. So maybe that gives a little bit more leniency to the guys who do spray it like a Patrick Reed, like Phil Mickelson. Like he tweeted out earlier that the rough's not as thick. Like take that with a grain of salt with Phil. But it's not going to be as thick. And Kenny Kim did mention that. Listen to his podcast, The Fantasy Golf Degenerates. He mentioned, though, that the rough or the stadium, like the right side of these holes, like the golf courses, are more for the stadium pews that he designed for the spectators. So that's on the right, and then you have water on the left. Now, it's not true for every single hole, but if you have a guy like Patrick Reed who's spraying it both ways, that gets a little scary, where he's going to have to scramble really well. But he's by Paul Casey, he's by Hideki, he's by Stenson, he's by Kuchar. I'd rather go those guys.
What does the ownership percentage look like between Sergio and Xander Schauffele? If Sergio is going to be lower owned, is he worth the extra cost? Now, It's my pick to win versus your pick to win right there. So I would just say play Sergio over Xander, and you would say play Xander over Sergio. I have them right around each other, to be perfectly honest with you. 15.6% to 16.8% to Xander. It'll be interesting to see how that actually shakes out, because if that really is a decision that people have to make for the $100 difference, do they all side with one, or do they all side with the other, or do you just start your lineups there and use both of them and build with a balance approach? But I would go with Sergio over Xander. Obviously, you would go Xander over Sergio, Reid?
Yeah, I like Xander, but Sergio, like I wouldn't knock you for Sergio. If you look at his recent form since like the debacle in the Sand where he just tore it to pieces, I mean, he's got so many top tens overseas. And so Sergio is playing really well. So he's got recent form, and he also has course history here. So if you're going Sergio, don't mind it at all. I just like Xander in terms of that pivot play. I like where his game's at. He doesn't have course history here, but I mean, he got a second place last year. So you want to take that with also the current form that I think he has a game, especially for here. And this tournament being sort of this platform for the breakout players, he is on this second tier, maybe at the bottom of the first tier. And that's giving him a ton of credit, but he's been playing extremely well at the beginning of the season. So personally, I like Xander, but if you're going Sergio, I mean, you're playing course history and current form.
Yeah, he's finished inside the top 10 in strokes gained approach in each of his past 3 starts on the PGA Tour, and in 7 top 10s in his last 10 worldwide starts as well. And there's a DQ in there, too. He failed his greenskeeper's exam, so that's never great. Kyle asks, thoughts on Russell Knox as a pivot off An and Im, 8.1 strokes gained approach last week. Can't do it with Russell Knox. I just feel like he has too many bad vibes at this course after his complete meltdown on 17, the year that Jason Day won. He was in the mix that year, and he pissed it all away on one hole. Maybe that lingers with him. Maybe it doesn't. Listen, if you want to pivot off the 2 chalk guys in the $6,000 area, although I'm using An and Im, it's never really a bad idea to fade the chalk in the lower ends because you're dealing with such specific talent versus high-end talent. But I just think those guys are better players than Russell Knox is.
Yeah, it's coming in top 30 in par 4 scoring, good with opportunities gained in that same time frame. But you're right. I mean, you even have, if you want to pay up right a little bit, you have your boy Luke List there at 7K. But in the 6K range, right, we have Kiradech, who's been playing decently, a little bit better as of late, putting better as of late as well. So if you want to stay in that high 6K range, he's someone I'm looking at as well to potentially pivot off if I want to. I mean, even Keith Mitchell, right, at 6,800. This guy is riding a heater right now, obviously, with his win and then his as a top American last week at Bay Hill. So those are the other guys I would play as opposed to Knox. I think you're right. He's got some bad juju here.
Aaron, Woodland or Leishman? I can tell you that I use one of these guys, and that man's name is Gary Woodland. That's who I'm using.
Same here, like Woodland.
Oh, people are responding to questions in the chat? That gets you banned for life! Actually, I'll put you on timeout because maybe you didn't know. Maybe you're late to it. It's the first chat back in. You're put on a timeout. No answering questions. No one's asking you. They're asking us. Watson or Howell? Seems like Watson is trending up with his new putter. I've heard a lot of Bubba chatter over like the last day that people are where they know he's going to be low owned. He's not going to be high owned. He is going to be low owned. But Rick was in on him, and just other players that I've talked to are using a lot of Bubba. I just feel like if Bubba's never won here, it's just not going to happen for him.
Yeah, I mean, he does decently on die courses, right? Match play. Again, you got to take that with a grain of salt because that's not necessarily a real tournament. It's a nice one to watch, but Bubba at that price, I like Hadwin, right? They're the same price. It's 7,300, so it's a matter of why I like more as opposed to I don't like what equipment is he using? Like, is he using the color ball? Is he not using the color ball? His putting is very streaky, and so. Does he have the talent to win? Absolutely. I don't see it here. I'd rather go Hadwin in that price range.
Question about Adam Hadwin. Thoughts on Adam Hadwin for this week at the Players' Championship? I mean, he's not played well recently. He played very poorly at Genesis, a place where he typically does play well. He was T33 last week, but he gained 5 strokes off the tee and lost with approach. That's really weird for Adam Hadwin. And even like he came 18th at the Pro-Am, and he gained 0.1 on approach. Like, the approach just hasn't been there since the Desert Classic, where he just tends to play well. I'd prefer Hadwin flame out this week so I can get back on him so we can win for the second time in 3 years next week at the Valspar Championship.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see it with Hadwin. It's just where we've seen him play well and how we've seen him play well. It's just not clicking. We've seen him in spots, right? So if you're the casual golfer and you saw him pop at the Pro-Am, like you were mentioning at Pebble, You're going to say, well, at this low price at 7,200, and again, going to be low owned. That's tempting, but again, I like the guys around there that I mentioned earlier, so I'm going to be out in that
one. Webb's approach stats from the Honda, are they an anomaly or a cause for concern? I could not tell you, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not Webb Simpson. I don't know how he's going to be hitting the ball this week. No one seems to be on the defending champion. As a contrarian play, I get it, but I think more people are off of Webb, not because of one bad week of approach, because he was so fire to begin the year with his irons. It's that the way that he won last year is so stupidly not duplicable that, like, is he really going to gain like 10 strokes putting again and lose strokes with approach and win by like 4 shots? That doesn't even seem plausible.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned it earlier too, right? In terms of guys who've won tournaments while losing strokes approach is a complete anomaly. And I don't even think in this history, at least I know in like the last 5 to 10 years, maybe even going back further, that a defending champion hasn't won. If you just look at it since 2014 or 2012, the guys who have won, since 2012 actually, the guys who have won, the best finish I think in the next year is Martin Keimer at like a T56. So it's extremely hard for whatever reason to go back to back, even to get in the top 10. Now Webb, he can get a heater. He can get all that good juju that he got, especially from last year. But I'm not going to be on back-to-back winning here.
Yeah, no one has actually ever repeated at this tournament, so I don't know if Webb is going to be the one to do it. Although at his price, he doesn't need to repeat. If he comes like T9, you're probably looking pretty good. I'm very new, but interested in fantasy golf. I've played the past few weeks, done okay, mainly using picks from you guys and other experts with quotation marks. I don't like that. I might have to ban you for life, pal. Any good ways to go about learning? I released a show on Sunday where I walk you through my process about how I actually research everything. Maybe just go check that out. And then you can improve upon that and become a much better player than me because I'm not that great of a player to begin with. Kisner, question mark? That's barely a question, sir. I'm using a minimal share of Kisner. I liked what I saw last week. Plus, I know he has good vibes at this course, Pete Dye tracks overall, and courses with very, very small greens because his up and down game is top notch.
Yeah, I like him as a pivot in that low 7 range. Like you mentioned it, Pete Dye specialist. Kuchar, obviously a little higher price than Kisner. So I don't mind it at all. I like Kisner this week.
Now, let's see. Next question. Is Tiger going to be a popular one-and-done pick this week? I believe that he will be. He might be the most popular.
Yeah, absolutely. And it depends. It depends if you're in Gup's contest. It depends where you are, right? There's a strategy involved in that. Sergio, I think, is going to be another popular play. Adam Scott, guys who have course form. So for me, I go to my little article I wrote up. That there's my one and done pick. I've said it already in the show. You probably know who it is. So I'm not going to be using it. But yeah, of course. I mean, Tiger, these popular guys at this public tournament. Yeah, he's going to be extremely popular.
What is scrambling? I don't know what that is. Let me pull up Sometimes there's a thing called Google that can answer a lot of these questions. Let's type that in to see what comes up for scrambling. All right, on the PGA Tour, scrambling. Wow, what is scrambling? PGA first thing that comes up. Scrambling is a statistic which measures a player's ability to recover from a missed greens in regulation. Imagine, for example, on a par 4, a player hits their second shot into a greenside bunker. Of course, measuring scrambling makes it an irrelevant statistics for many amateur players. So if you don't hit a green in regulation, can you still make par? That's scrambling. And it could be from anywhere. So it's a really tough stat to figure out. Like, if you put it into the water on this course, then you're immediately scrambling. So it doesn't necessarily correlate with around the green like a lot of people think it does.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing I will add to that is obviously it involves putting, right? You got to get your up and down if you're in the bunker or if you're around the green. So with that being said, right, putting is an extremely variant statistic. So around the green obviously is more specific, but yeah, that's the only thing I would add to that.
Donna, golf is enjoyable, but won't save you from whoever rejects the sun. Will never see life, for the wrath of God remains on them. The only way to be saved is through faith, the eternal sinless Son, Jesus Christ. Jesus fucking Christ, pal. You know what you are? Banned for life! Fuck off. Jesus. Imagine having that sort of time on your hands.
Wow.
Thoughts on
all caps? The message all caps?
No, the message was not all caps, thankfully. Then I would have had to scream it into the camera. Thoughts on Jimmy Walker? Did well last year. Yeah, I can't pull the trigger on old Jimmy. What about you?
No way. Even though you don't need off the tee here, it's just old Jimmy is tough play this week, so no for me.
Good comment by Chris. So at the person who just mentioned that, are you taking Jesus as your one and done? Probably a good pick this week if you're Donna.
Yeah.
Reed, this is for you. Good to see you on the show. Pat joked about making an all-Asian squad. Would you recommend an all-Euro team? He also says, smash that like button, which he is true about.
Is he asking like the Asian on their show? If, like, I thought that's where the question was going. You know what's interesting about an all Euro, and we saw that at Bay Hill, so I think that's where that question is coming from, is a lot of these guys, because of the earlier schedule here in March, have they played on the PGA Tour in the States recently? So I would first look at that as opposed to just saying, I like the Euro guys, and then just going from there. So check if they've played in the States at least twice, or whatever metric that you want to use. Obviously, I like PGA National as a corollary. So even going further down, I would like the Euro players that played at that course. But first, start with the guys who have played at least 2 or 3 times before the players. And then also what you mentioned, Pat, guys who have played at TPC Sawgrass before. So not first timers.
Poopsie Not says 5 tourneys, players plus 4 majors. Can't use players more than once. Thoughts on this one? Sergio, Hideki, and Casey, Rory currently. I mean, if you can pick anyone you want, it's $2.25 million to the winner of this one. I think it's the highest one, to be perfectly honest with you, for winner's share. Maybe the U.S. Open is equivalent to it, but I think that might just be $2 million. So I wouldn't really worry about like sleeper picks. If you only have a max of 25 people to use, just use the 25 best players at any certain time.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. Just use the top 25.
Yeah, just don't outthink yourself when it comes to this using real sneaky plays. Now, when you're dealing with a salary cap like on DraftKings, sure, go for it. But if everyone is exactly the same price and there's no cost to them, just use the best guys. That always makes the most sense. Where are we at here? I got Ryan Palmer or Lucas B. I assume that means Lucas G in terms of Lucas Glover. I'm not going to use either of them, although this whole fading Coke Rack and fading Lucas Glover thing has really not been paying off for me.
Yeah, I mean, Lucas Glover, I mean, we talk about a guy who's kind of turned his career around. He's had his fair share of ups and downs.
This is where it happened last year too, was the Players Championship, his whole fiasco.
Yeah, exactly. Poor guy, man. I felt really bad for him. But look, whatever his motivation is, he's been playing a lot better. And it's kind of a la Webb Simpson, where he came in too, kind of unnoticed, and then he hit this hot putting streak. And that's what Lucas Glover is doing. He's got solid finishes over this, his past 3 or 4 tournaments. So I do like Lucas Glover at this tournament.
Any course history plays this week, Pat? Chris Kirk is really the only one that I went with, but he's also coming off a really good week at Bay Hill. He has the 5th most strokes gained of any player in this field the past 5 years, which is kind of nuts to think about. And his short game is so elite that if the ball striking isn't quite there, hopefully he can get it within a 3-foot radius around the hole, and maybe he won't miss those putts. I have so many shitty putters on my team this week, and I hope it plays a bit more like 2 years ago than last year, when at the top of the leaderboard you had like Woo and JB Holmes and Louis Oosthuizen and Kyle Stanley, and just Team No Putt showed up 2 years ago, and last year it was like very solid putters. So listen, Chris Kirk is like the one course history play that I'm making at $6,400.
Yeah, Kuchar would be someone else that not necessarily.
But Kuchar's playing well though, like.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I was going to say. Right, the guys
you could throw course history out the window and still end up on Kuchar.
Yeah. So that's how I was going to mention, is that, Kevin Kisner, right? Kevin Kisner has shown that he, in recent form, in recent tournaments that he's playing, a little bit better, but over the course of what we've seen in the last 6, 7, 8 tournaments, not playing exactly well. So Kisner would be the only guy I would add to that.
Do you like Jim Furyk as a pivot off the glove? I do. I did use Jim Furyk here.
Yeah, I mean, like we've seen Stephen Ames and these kind of guys, these older guys do well here. So Jim Furyk, he is the guy that doesn't necessarily need to hit it a ton to contend here, and that's this type of course. So I like Furyk as well.
So Furyk, just very interesting on him. The last 3 events that he's played, the Pro-Am, the Genesis, which is a course that does not suit him whatsoever because it's way too long, and Honda, 14th, 37th, 9th, gained 2.4, 2, and 3.9 strokes on approach. The off-the-tee game is not going to be there for him because the distance really holds him back, but if he can just be accurate off the tee, even if he's not long, the rest of his game has been immaculate. Approach, putting, and around the green. That I do like Jim Furyk. He actually came second the year that Martin Keimer won. I guess Martin Keimer would be one of those those course history plays that I'm actually using here this week, but I just like Party Marty. I go down with the Keimer ship as much as I can. But Jim Furyk is someone that is in. I can give you an accurate figure on how many lineups that I have Jim Furyk in. 10% of my lineups. So I use him in 3 of 21.
Yeah, and if you just look at his past stats, I mean, like you mentioned, he's getting strokes of approach over the last 3. We talked about the scrambling. If you want to use that stat that we just learned about, he's number 1 over the past 24 rounds. Now, he's missing greens potentially because that's where that stat comes from. But if you want to necessarily, if you want to pivot in that said, like the high 6, low 7K range, Jim Furyk is not bad at all.
DFS Tavern, good to see you, Pat and Reed. I always enjoy these live shows. We enjoy doing them for you, the peoples out there. Question, stars and scrubs or balance build for GPPs? I think that more people will be doing a balance build because it's so much easier to construct a roster that you really like from top to bottom because the field is so deep that maybe, and I've used some balance rosters, some stars and scrubs, that stars and scrubs is the more unpopular approach this week, which could open up access to a lot of top-end players. But like we've mentioned, top-end players just don't seem to play well here, at least in terms of winning and top-fiving. They make the cut and they generate birdies, but it's not necessary this week like it is in some of the others.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going balance, just like you mentioned, but we've seen guys like Ricky and JT and Rahm not necessarily do well. Dustin Johnson, I mean, that's sort of at the top of the show where we were saying at the elite pricing range that there's a case that you can build for, but also at this course you can say, well, because guys that in the mid 7K range have won the optimal lineup last year's won. You can totally fade the top there and still have a solid lineup coming into this week. So I'm going balance, but even if you want to go Contrarian on that, you're right. Less people are going to be using that strategy, the stars and scrubs.
Beat Michigan 100, so don't go blue. And thanks for taking Tiger. I got my Stenson and Cooch tickets in. That has been the way to play this so far this year. The guys that I really want to bet don't end up betting. They're the guys that end up winning, and I end up with no money. And people out there have been using this ploy and making money off of it. So good luck with bad luck with your Stenson Cooch tickets. Now I hope they both miss. Well, I hope Coocher makes the cut. I could use Stenson making the cut. That would be fine. Let's see here. Oh, good. People are answering questions for one another. Again, if you're answering people's questions and clogging up the chat, which you've just done, you will get banned for life. And now the chat has jumped on me. Great, because people have been mucking it up in here. We have to start just randomly banning people. Anyone see projected ownership on Xander Schauffele and... who's the other one? Justin Thomas. Justin Thomas, I have around 13%. Xander approaching now 17% ownership. Do you think that sticks?
I think so. When you get like the soft pricing, it's really going to have ownership go across. It's going to spread it out. In any of these ranges where we have the Xanders and the JTs. I have JT around maybe like you said 15, 16%, and Xander around the same area. So I think it sticks.
Got in late, 2 for cash. Kuchar, Poulter, Matsuyama, CH3. I'll go Poulter and Matsuyama. I really like them.
Yeah, I mean, CH3, the guy makes cuts, right? So if you're going cash, I think CH3 is if you don't necessarily like Matsuyama's putting on Bermuda, which is atrocious, then CH3, but I like those two as well.
Why would anyone ever play bad putters? You can't win if you can't putt. You're banned for life. This is team putting doesn't matter, so you can go fuck yourself, pal. Get your trash out of my chat. Stuck between X and JT. Well, they're not even close in pricing, so you can just go with the guy who's cheaper with X and then take someone else who's not Justin Thomas if you want to. How about Rose? What do we do with Rose? Rose does not have a great course history here. He's coming off a bad week. I always like playing Rose coming off a bad week, so I've bit the bullet. I have Rose in 29% of my lineups. I ended up moving on to him and not going full force all in on Tiger Woods here, but... I don't know, it's scary. And sometimes making lineups that make you feel a bit uncomfortable. It's weird to say, hey, Justin Rose, he's the number 2 player in the world. I don't know how he's going to play, but I don't know. There seems to be something off with him. There's 2 courses in his career where he has a career over par track record. Heritage is one of them. This is the other one. Both Pete Dye tracks, both Bermuda greens, both tiny greens, but on paper, it sets up perfectly for him.
Yeah, no kidding, right? And he is the Jekyll and Hyde of this tournament. We've seen him miss cuts. We've seen him get a top 5. He's played a lot here, and so we've seen him quite a few times at the Players. And so you would think that, like you mentioned, especially at a die course where you need to be precise off the tee, not necessarily in the dead center of the fairway, but precise off the tee to attack these greens. But he just hasn't played all that well. So good GPP play. I like it as much as you do in terms of that. But you just if you want, like I said earlier in the show, if you want to start with DJ Rose, that's a great contrarian lineup because of the talent you're going to get. But you're going to take some win equity out because Rose just hasn't done well here in the past. Could it switch? Potentially, because he's the second best player in the world. But I'm not as heavy. I got about like 15% Rose just because you want, if he finds something, you want Rose, especially coming off a bad week.
Does Hao Tong Lee just plain suck? Cust has got me into the Hao Tong trap, and I just can't get out of it. Hao Tong quicksand. That's tough. Hao Tong's a lot like Siwoo Kim when it comes down to his results. Either he's at the very top of the leaderboard or the very bottom of the leaderboard. He's an interesting GPP flyer just because you know he can go low, and he's played in big boy fields. Like, he's outran guys like Dustin Johnson. We remember his British Open from 2 years ago when he really made a run at it, ended up in the winning DraftKings Millionaire Maker lineup. So I can't really say anything negative about Hao Tong. The skill is clearly there, but if you just scroll down day one and the guy's +7 because he's put 4 balls in the water, that's the risk you take with Hao Tong.
Yeah, and he doesn't play a lot in the PGA, right? We obviously see him in WGCs, majors, because of how well he's played and his overall golf ranking. But again, in this range, depending on what you're playing, obviously we're talking about GPPs here. Yes, he's a good pivot play because we've seen him pop. But I mean, if you just look at last week at Arnold Palmer, I mean, the guy lost a ton of strokes putting around the greens, just par 4 scoring wasn't there. So that obviously scares you with Hao Tong, why he's priced down in this range. Augusta, maybe, obviously because of his history, but I'm not playing Hao Tong.
Let's see. Rahm wins the whole damn thing. ? That's sort of a question. Listen, I love John Rahm, so I wouldn't hate to see him, but I'm not using any Rahm here. This is interesting. Ownership breakdown I have right now of these guys in the upper 9. So it just seems with the way that lineups are breaking down that people are using basically one of the top 4 guys, Tiger, Rory, Justin Thomas, and Dustin Johnson, then dropping down into that Sergio, Xander, Molinari range for the next guy. But Ricky, 8% ownership projection. Rahm, 7% ownership projection. Bryson, 6% ownership projection. Jason Day, 9% ownership projection. So, and Brooks comes in at 11%. So it seems like from Rose all the way down to Day, that is going to be the overlooked area. So if you do have strong feelings about players in there, really go hard on them because no one is taking those guys. And if you want to take the chalkier guys down the list, be it a Matt Kuchar or Hideki or Stenson or Paul Casey, starting your lineup with 2 of those guys or even one of those guys is a great way to differentiate your lineup without getting off the chalk and without leaving money on the table.
Yeah, and just John Rahm specifically, right? He's only played here twice, and he's had 2 terrible finishes here, missing the cut, and then obviously I think he came in like the mid-60s most recently. But you just look at his greens in regulation. You look at what he's been able to do at this tournament, and we talked about it, man. If he gets in a place where he just doesn't like the shot, if he has to hit a fade off the tee, then a draw, and he just doesn't accomplish what he's out there to do, he just folds like a deck of cards. Could he win? When we talk about top 5 equity, what we've seen from him in the past overseas and here, absolutely. And you're right. I mean, one of these guys in this range is going to outshine their projected ownership, outshine what they've been doing in recent form. I'd rather go elsewhere than John Rahm, and I'm willing to eat that because he hasn't shown it either here or just in recent form.
So we are at the 15-minute warning for the show. Start loading your questions into the bottom of the chat now. Smash the like button because we're going rapid fire, Reid. No more time for in-depth explanations. We got to answer the people's questions before we get out of here. We want to get to them all. You can always tweet at me at the PME. I'll try to get to them, or tweet at Reid T. Fowler. He's got some answers for you as well. Plus, I have all the shows, all the cheat sheets. If you hit the description of this video or even in the comment section below, you can find all the hyperlinks to all the content that's come out. And a lot of the answers do reside in there. Thoughts on Poulter? Love Poulter. What's the optimal number of players in a player pool for creating 10 GPP lineups? There is no optimal number. I would say the less you can fit into 10 GPP lineups, the better, though.
Yeah, 3 or 4 is what I would, if there is a number out there.
You would only pick 3 or 4 players for 10 GPP lineups? That seems rather low.
Like your core players, like if you want to have a core where you have them across 50% of your lineups, in that sense, you want the diversity. So if you're going to use a core of players, then like you said, minimizing that. If you want a number, I like 3 or 4.
You can even go to DFS On Demand or Rick Gaiman's YouTube channel, the Rick Run Good YouTube channel. He explained a little bit about the cascading approach to building a core, and I think that could really help with 10 lineups. So if you go to the Rick Run Good YouTube channel, Rick has stuff over there. I really enjoy his process on that and his thought process behind it. But I always think the fewer players you can use in lineups, like if you're playing 10 GP lineups, maybe 12, 13 players is the way to go. You got to make a hard stance, because if it works, you want to be able to cash in and have the right permutation of lineup so you can capitalize and actually win these tournaments. Missed cut parlay. I'm not playing any of those for the Players Championship. I lose enough money as it is on the players that I'm just not going through that. Thoughts on Steele or Sabatini as a punt? Both have good course history. I just don't think Steele can replicate what he did last week, getting like 8 strokes putting. That's so atypical of him. And Rory Sabatini, maybe he'll beat the other Rory. I don't know. Slovakia's own Rory Sabatini, I'm just not feeling him here.
Yeah, the OG Rory. No, I'm not feeling either. And like with Steele, obviously you like the par 5 scoring, but I'm not him either.
Do we still ride with Killer Keith this week? I mean, you can. He's playing exceptionally well. I chose not to, though.
Yeah, you're going to fade that recent history and that form. So I like Killer Keith this round, but not as much as previous.
Players to make the cut in each price point. I mean, you've been watching the whole fucking show, man. Like, clearly you know who it is. Sorry if you already addressed this. Weather affecting decisions? No. If you keep banning people, there will be no one left. That means you, sir, are banned for life. Luke List, question mark. You clearly know what about Luke. Are you using Luke List?
A little bit, yeah. Not a lot. Only like 10%.
I'm using him at 20%, and I bet Luke List is the best player on tour. Let's go. Thoughts on VJ? Top 40 or top 20? Recent form, course history? The guy's got to be running out of steam. He's 98 years old. He's played like 3 weeks in a row. I'm not going to be going with VJ here.
Yeah, and he's using those high-intensity interval training workouts, so he's got to be out of gas. Good story, but nah, I'm on a VJ.
Can you believe Fleetwood went full Keegan last weekend? He clearly did not go full Keegan. What did Fleetwood come, like third?
Yeah, and Keegan, he shot like a 78 on Sunday. No one can go full Keegan like Keegan. So I'm still trusting Fleetwood. I think he's one of the best. He's a rising star, so I like Fleetwood. Don't worry about him.
Rafa Cabrera Bayo for the win? Certainly hope not after he didn't come through for me last week.
God, I mean, just like an average round on Friday would have been great, because I loved RCB as well last week, but not this week.
Thoughts on Aaron Wise? His game seems like a good fit for this course. I always like Aaron Wise at places where you can really establish driver off. But, I mean, he's played well at courses where Jason Day has played well. He's almost like the new Kevin Chappell, where they can both kind of mix together. I just have seen so little consistency from Aaron Wise that he's really hard to trust. But I do know his upside is winning upside. So if you're feeling it, Aaron Wise is fine.
Yeah, I just like Lucas Glover in that price range a little bit more. Don't mind Wise, but you're right. Driving distance, premium golf courses, not here.
Just kidding. I wanted to see if you got tilted by the wrong full Keegan reference. I did. But questions like that, mucking up the chat, might get you banned for life. Just a timeout for now. If I see anything else from you, Paul Lemontang, you're going to be banned for life. It's Rory time, guys. Hop on the train. You're telling me that the guy with the lowest odds in the field might be a good play? Oh, thanks. Jerk. Very Anderhurst. Riddell softball 22. Scott Kuchar Casey as the last piece. I prefer Paul Casey as my last piece.
Yeah, same here. I like Casey.
Is Ryan Moore a solid pivot for the low chalk 7 guys? I prefer Kisner and I prefer Furyk over him.
Yeah, I mentioned some other guys. I don't like him at this course. I mean, clearly he's a ball striker, but not for me, not this course.
Thanks, Pat. You have to understand, you have to be different to win. Picking top 5, everyone does that. Do they do that, though, or do people outsmart themselves? And where you have a different combination, this is back to the guy with the major tournaments, you can just use a different combination of the top 5. Not everyone's going to do that. So if you're taking Ben An to win here, listen, I love Ben An. There's a reason he's 100-1 this week. You might want to go with one of the 35 players who are better than he is. Odds at Sink makes the cut. I didn't actually see any odds posted for him. It's probably around even money. Good short game, but the irons have not been typical of Stuart Sink irons over the last 2 years. So big pass for me.
Yeah, Stu Monjay, he's a pass.
Rory or Rose? I'm going with Rose.
Oh, yeah, I have to go with Rose as well.
Furyk or Glover? I'll go Furyk.
Glover.
Who would be a fade to play put in lineups? That's barely a question. Thanks. Baby swag, rub off on my DraftKings performance. I tend not to try to rub off on my DraftKings performance unless I win a whole lot of money that week. Hopefully so. I feel like after I won all the awards for the shows, that was my baby swag in full force. So I don't know. Yeah. Maybe. Just join. Probably answer this. Thoughts on An versus Im? I just use both of them, but I do like Ben An more than I like Sung Jae.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, but Im's a good pivot, right? I mean, he's
not
well.
though. He's gonna be double-digit ownership.
He's gonna be double. That's what I was gonna say. He's gonna be highly owned, and so Benny. And if you just look at his approach game, it's amazing coming into this tournament. I think he's gained approach 9 of the last 10 tournaments he's played. So I like An, even though he's going to be like a 10-12% own in this low 6K range. I like him, but I'm not a bad pivot for me.
Heard the wind may be more gusty on Thursday compared to evening, although the weather report does not indicate that. If you do think so, and you do want to T-stack the Thursday morning tee times, go for it. I think blindly T-stacking either wave is always a smart approach if you're playing a bunch of lineups, just to put yourself into a position where it's the weather. We're more than 24 hours away. Even if we were 10 hours away or 3 hours away, you can't predict how the weather is going to go. That's an ultimate variable. So if you put yourself into a position where you can T-stack to take advantage of one wave, getting it way easier, I would recommend doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I look at weather more for like first round leader type bets and that. But if there is one, like you mentioned, AM, PM, just because of softer conditions, right? These guys can stop it on these greens. So that'd be my preference.
What is Rafa's ownership looking like? I got him at 15.5 right now, by far the highest of anyone in that range outside of Woodland and Poulter, although I haven't projected higher than both of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, just because he did well, he top 3 last week at Bay Hill. So yeah, at 50%, 20%.
Is Jason Day a very smart or very stupid pick in one and done? Well, I don't think a lot of people are going to use him in one and done. So if he wins, you're going to gain a bunch of money on the field. So if you got the guts for it, I'd say do it.
Yeah, I don't have the guts. I had him at the beginning of this week, and I switched him out for Xander just because I need to get a little bit more contrarian with my one and done. But yeah, I had him earlier in the week, so I don't mind it.
Casey or Poulter? I'll go Paul Casey.
Oh man, Casey.
That's for a single entry GPP. Casey's going to carry more ownership, but they're both going to be highly owned. So yeah. I'll go with the guy that I think is more likely to win. Thoughts on Brandt Snedeker? Don't really have any thoughts on Brandt Snedeker, to tell you the truth.
Nah, me neither. Out on Sneds.
Let's see. What has Snedeker done here? Snedeker has, I probably shouldn't be doing this with only 5 minutes left to go, but I'm now very curious because I didn't even look at the guy. Players last 6 years, miscut, 48th, 8th miscut. That's his last 6 years at this tournament. No one's even made a note about him on Fantasy National, so I can guarantee you no one's going to own him. If Brandt Snedeker is a guy that you want to take a pivot play on at very, very, very low ownership. Rose, 2 awful rounds last week at API. Switched to Harma, poor course history. Too many at that price? That's, again, barely a question. Like, I don't know what's wrong with you. Figure it out.
Do you mean Hanma? His clubs? The brand? I hope so.
Just construct a sentence properly and I'll answer the question if I can figure out what it means.
Rose is good. There you go.
Thoughts on using bogey avoidance lineup? I like this. Is this too much of a crapshoot for this stat? I don't think that bogey avoidance is a good predictor of stats. It's almost like WAR in baseball, where you look back at after the fact and it tells you a story about what happened. But there's so many key elements. Like if a player is a really good putter and was really hot with putting that week, well, then he's going to be good at bogey avoidance. The same thing pertains to scrambling. Like if someone is just gaining like 8 strokes putting, of course the scrambling is going to be good because they've made every putt. I would just prefer to use the more predictable and projectable around the green stats for strokes gained, because that gives you who are the guys that put themselves into the best chance to save bogey. If people are running cold with the putter that week, then they're not going to rate highly in bogey avoidance. So I don't think it's a super predictable stat. That's just my take. Yeah. Do you ever factor it in?
That's a secondary stat. So if I have a tiebreaker on someone, potentially, I will use something like that, or like scrambling. I mean, even DK points, right? I mean, you're not going to necessarily use too much of that, or if any, in your model. So just using it as a holistic approach, as a secondary stat, as opposed to a key stat of mine.
Favorite player in the mid $7,000 range? It's Ian Poulter for me, but I did use a bushel of Brendan Grace.
Yeah, it's Hadden, but then Woodland as a close second for me.
I did use Woodland as well, and Keimer in that range too, to diversify myself a little bit. You in on Luke List this week? I'm in on Luke List every week. Come on now. Have you never watched the show before? Thoughts on Charles Howell? I'm not using him.
I'm not either. Again, cut equity is great, but I'm not using CH3.
I should say odds and lines are subject to change. See website for actual odds. If you or anyone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER. We got 2 minutes left. You ready to fire through this?
Nope.
Molly or Tony Finau in GPPs? I'll take Molly.
I'll go Finau GPPs.
Sam Ryder? No for me.
No.
Xander or Sergio at the price? Sergio.
Xander.
Thoughts on Phil low ownership? Still can't do it. Although I feel like his head-to-heads are a trap, so I stayed away.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. What do we do with Shez?
Yeah,
What do we do with Shez? I'm not playing him.
No, don't play him.
Leishman seems overlooked. No. I hate when people say things like that. Like, no? My wife does it to me, and it just irks me. Just make a statement and then add no to make it a question. Like, come on now. Just construct your sentences so it's an actual question. Leishman's fine. People will use him. People always end up sneakily on Leishman because they'll see him as the pivot play from everyone else in that area. Then he'll end up at like 12% ownership. He's a fine play. He's just not for me.
Yeah, especially at that price. We don't want to see him in the 9K range. Gets a little too expensive there. But at this price, yeah, he's a fine play.
Do you think native Florida players have any advantage considering the overseeded turf this week? I don't think so, no.
Yeah, not really.
Poulter over Stenson? Yes.
Yeah.
Beauregard, a better course fit than Matt Wallace? Maybe. He did play really well at Honda, but you got to remember, Lucas Beauregard is an absolute gas can. The guy can shoot 82 or 62. Like, you never know which guy's going to show up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Matty Wallace has a little bit better recent history, so I'll go Wallace there.
Highest owned golfer at any price this week? I'm going to say it's Paul Casey. It could be Monday.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe, yeah. I mean, Ricky always garners a ton of ownership every single week, so maybe, but he's coming in lower owned. But yeah, I mean, Casey is going to be a high owned guy.
What do you think of Kevin Kisner and Chris Kirk's ownership? Can you use them in the same lineup? Let's see. I think I have used them in the same lineup. Around 6% for Kisner and around 8% for Chris Kirk. So, yeah, you don't need to use them in the same lineup, but you can if you really want to. The ownership's not going to kill you. Let's see. Kuchar's ownership, I have projected around 14%. Besides the PME Open, what's the best contest to play in your opinion? The one that pays the most money, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Smash the like button. Yes, please do that on the way out. Xander, number one for me. Coke rack ownership. That is where we will end off. What do you think it's going to be? Just a blind guess here. I'll tell you what I have the projection at.
I got him at maybe 12% is probably where he's going to come at.
11.8% is where he's coming in right now. Ann is higher. Im is higher by like a percentage point. So that decision, I feel like one of those guys will end up really high owned and one of those guys will end up really low owned because everyone will gravitate towards one when all is said and done. Because unless some people are just playing Ann, Im, Coke rack lineups and padding the top end, that could be a way that people go to. Reid, tell everyone where they can find your work, where they can watch you and follow you on Twitter.
Yeah, Reid T. Fowler. You can find my work. All the links are there. Nightly, Monday through Friday, we have the Sweat where we talk about golf, football. We have one tonight that we're talking about all the free agencies, but mainly golf. That's where we really want to harbor and stamp down this point here in this show. So Reid T. Fowler on every social media platform.
This was the Pat Mayo Experience. I am Pat Mayo. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, or the Instagrams at the PME. My betting cheat sheet is in the description of this video and up on my Facebook page like it is on every Wednesday. I got stuff in golfdigest.com. You can go read that. All my shows from earlier in the week. Thank you all for filling the Pat Mayo Experience DraftKings Open so early this week. 5K bodes well for something at the Masters, maybe an even bigger prize pool to go with it. And smash the like button on the way out. And you can download the podcast on the audio feed and get into a draw for 20 DK bucks if you leave a 5-star review, something nice about the show, and your DraftKings handle on those audio feeds: iTunes, Stitcher, Podomatic, Spotify. Doesn't matter where it is. If you leave the review, I shall see it, and you will be in the draw. Winners announced on Monday's show. Good luck with the Players' Championship. I hope to hear from some of you with some big wins this week. I mean, I hope I win the most of anyone, but if I can't, I hope it's one of you guys out there. All right? Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.